Hello everyone, Nolan West here. Special session has been over for 2 weeks now, and today I'm going to cover the major budget bills with some highlights and lowlights. I was going to do every bill, but the script went really long, and nobody wants to watch a 45-minute budget video. So let's get into the big ones. And first up is my personal favorite, transportation. This bill was overwhelmingly approved by 112 to 21 vote, and my personal favorite provision in it, without a doubt, is the $7 million for Highway 65 at 99th Avenue intersection. These funds, combined with the $1.5 million I got last session, and with grants that the city of Blaine has already acquired, officially makes this project shovel-ready, and construction will start at latest by 2024. So you might say, why aren't you doing 109th? Which I totally understand. That was my first thought when I first was elected, and I pushed for funding for it. But in order for that project to go forward, the frontage road on the west side of 65 needs to be completed. So we can't start on that right away, but we can't not do anything. That would be insane. Highway 65 has the same amount of traffic as 35W, but with a stoplight every half mile or less. It needs improvements ASAP, so 99th is where we're going to start because that's what's ready the soonest. The transportation bill also included funding for additional state troopers and pay raises for our state patrol, which they desperately needed considering all the work they did keeping us safe during the riots last summer. And that's the transportation bill, my favorite. Now on to the state government finance bill, which is not nearly as good. This bill funds state government agencies throughout Minnesota government, and this bill was the bill that finally ended the governor's emergency powers, which if you want more information on that, watch my last video. I don't want to get into it here. But this bill was atrocious, and I mean it. It was full of pork for bureaucrats. Every state agency saw huge increases to their budget, and it borrows $288 million for renovation of the state office building. And that's just ridiculous. The last time the Democrats were in the majority in the state Senate, they spent $90 million on a new office building. They also spent around $300 million renovating the state capitol. So you look at $288 million, that's over 3 times the cost of a brand new Senate building and almost as much as the capitol renovation. They must plan on forging the desks out of solid gold and replacing the speaker's gavel with Thor's hammer or something. It's an insane amount of money. Next up, we have K-12 education, and this bill is over 40% of our state budget by itself. And it just drives me people nuts when people say, well, we don't properly fund our schools, when it's the single largest expenditure of the state by billions of dollars. And this bill originally left the House with critical race theory policy in it, but thankfully the Senate removed those provisions. And all in all, it was a decent bill, but most importantly, it brings more money to Centennial, Spring Lake Park, and Anoka-Hennepin school districts, which COVID kind of set them back. Unfortunately, House Democrats removed Senate language that allowed some amount of student school choice, but we will keep pushing that in the future because that's the direction we have to move. And next up, we have the Commerce Bill. The most noteworthy provision in this bill is something that wasn't included, actually. An extension of Minnesota's Health Insurance Stabilization Program, otherwise known as reinsurance. From 2014 to 16, Minnesota's individual health insurance market was brought to the brink of collapse by the Affordable Care Act, as I'm sure you know. I mean, we had skyrocketing insurance costs up to 60%, insurers just fleeing the marketplace, and enrollment caps. And we also had many counties all around the state that only had one health plan option. When I was in the majority in 2017, we passed reinsurance, and that stabilized the market and significantly lowered healthcare costs. Failing to continue this program will, and I mean will, cause insurance rates on the individual market to climb again and reduce healthcare plan options all over again. And reinsurance itself was one of the very few government programs that worked as intended and came in significantly under budget. It's just a travesty we aren't continuing it. Next up, the Environment Bill. This bill funds the DNR, MPCA, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and the Minnesota Zoo. This bill is relatively uneventful, but it had one glaring omission like the Commerce Bill. House Democrats switched out a provision that prevented the Walz administration from bypassing the legislature and implementing California car standards in Minnesota. It blows my mind. Without the consent of the people, it puts California bureaucrats, not even Minnesota bureaucrats, in charge of our automotive industry. This will raise the prices of cars across the board, like everything in California. And this is at a time when prices on everything is skyrocketing, not just cars. Currently, this is moving through the rulemaking process, and it also is being litigated in the courts, so it could still be stopped, but it would have been better if we just nipped it in the bud in the bill itself. So lastly, we have the tax bill. This bill contains some provisions that we should have passed months ago. It exempted forgiven PPP loans from state taxation and exempted pandemic unemployment boosts from taxation as well. When the bill left the House, it had over $1 billion in tax hikes, but thankfully, those were all stripped out. I mean, you can't legitimize raising taxes when we had the largest surplus in state history. So, all in all, that's a summary of the big bills. They weren't too bad, but this whole budget is based on billions and billions in federal government money, and the drunken spending at the federal level is a big reason why we're seeing prices rise on everything across the board. This isn't sustainable in the long run, but at least in Minnesota, we're required to have a balanced budget. However, that's almost a moot point now because the federal government keeps dumping freshly printed money on us. So your taxes aren't going up, but your money's worth less. So effectively, you're being taxed without a vote, which is how, politicians really like to raise taxes. So anyways, that's kind of a side note. That's a summary of the biggest bills that came out. And overall, not too bad, but it has not fixed anything. And we need to start paying attention to how the federal government's spending their money. But I skipped over a whole lot. So if you have any questions or anything at all, please let me know and I'll get right back to you. So, as always, have a good one, and I'll see you next time.